A third round of nuclear talks in Oman concluded on Saturday between the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran, with both sides expressing optimism that a deal curbing Iranian nuclear ambitions was within reach. The details in the following report. The United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran held a new round of nuclear talks on Saturday, as both sides expressed confidence that a deal could be reached. Experts from both sides first met to discuss technical details for a potential agreement. This was followed by indirect negotiations between Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and President Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff through Omani intermediaries. At the conclusion of the talks, Omani Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi announced that negotiations would continue next week, adding that the two sides shared a common aspiration to reach an agreement based on mutual respect and lasting commitments. He added that core principles, objectives, and technical concerns were all addressed. Iran's foreign minister said the talks had become more serious and expressed satisfaction with the pace, saying Tehran hoped to make rapid progress. Yet questions remain. The United States has repeatedly stated that it would not allow Iran to maintain its nuclear program, while Tehran has said the issue of uranium enrichment was non-negotiable. Since taking office, President Trump has reinstated a maximum pressure campaign on the regime, now opting for a diplomatic solution to curb Iran's nuclear ambitions rather than a military strike in collaboration with Israel. Ahead of the third round of talks, in an interview with Time magazine, President Trump expressed confidence that a deal could be reached, though he reiterated his threat that if talks failed, a military strike would be back on the table led by the United States. And just as talks between the United States and Iran were underway, a massive explosion rocked Iran's largest port. The cause, a suspected explosion due to the poor storage of hazardous chemicals. All the details in the following report. At least 18 people were killed and more than 700 injured after a massive explosion at Iran's largest port, the Shahid Raja'i port near Bandar Abbas on Saturday. As of Sunday morning, Iranian authorities said the fire was under control, though a state of emergency was declared in the region due to a significant rise in air pollution as a result of the explosion and the hazardous chemicals spewed into the air.
باید این حادثه در حال حاضر که در حال انجام اقدامات عملیات و امداد هستیم بعد از این شاید ان شاءالله جمعیت لازم انجام خواهد.
Iranian state TV reported that officials blamed the explosion on the poor storage of flammable chemicals in containers at the port. Yet an Iranian government spokesperson said it was not yet possible to determine the cause of the blast. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian ordered an immediate investigation into the incident and sent his interior minister to examine the dimensions of the accident. Located near the strategic Strait of Hormuz, the port is Iran's biggest, handling the majority of the country's container goods. It is believed that Iran stored chemicals for the production of ballistic missiles at the port. And the death count now up to 28 people. And joining us now with more on the nuclear talks and the explosion at Iran's main port is United States Colonel Rich Outzen from the Atlantic Council. Thank you for joining us today.
Good to be with you.
So both sides, the United States and Iran, seem very committed to these nuclear talks. It's clear that the Islamic Republic of Iran is trying to get sanctions lifted after President Trump's maximum pressure campaign has essentially brought the regime to the brink. But the Ayatollahs are at their weakest point today. So why negotiate? Why give this regime a lifeline?
Well, I think that's exactly the time you want to negotiate with someone, because most people in a negotiation, if they are negotiating from a position of strength, have very little incentive to grant concessions. I think President Trump does not necessarily want regime change in Iran. He'd prefer a weakened regime that's willing to make concessions on the portfolios of greatest interest to the United States, like the nuclear proliferation issue. And now's the time to do it. I think Trump, as a negotiator and as a businessman, understands you put carrots and sticks on the table at the same time. Lifting of sanctions, sure, but at the same time, maximum pressure and potentially even military pressure against the Houthis and elsewhere. I think it's actually a very effective negotiating strategy, and I think that's what you want to push for. When your enemy or your partner in negotiations in this case is at their weakest, that's when you press for the deal.
And what are some of the points of contention that remain that we know of today? And do you believe the Trump administration will allow Iran to keep some sort of basic nuclear program?
Well, I think so. I think the outlines of a deal have actually been known for some time. If you look back into the first Obama administration, before we got into the JCPOA business, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which really gave far too much leeway to the Iranians in terms of few restrictions and did absolutely nothing with their regional destabilizing behaviors. Before that JCPOA, there was a deal on the table that involved taking a certain enrichment grade of uranium to a third country and then making sure it got processed just right to the level for nuclear energy, but could not be enriched further to weapons grade. And I think something like that preserves the technical means for a peaceful nuclear program is probably the trade space, because that allows Iran to save face by saying, look, this is part of our energy portfolio. And of course, we never wanted nuclear weapons, which of course we don't believe. But I think if the pressure could yield that, I think that's probably what is on the table now, is what mechanism and what steps to get sanctions relief in exchange for very ironclad guarantees that there will be a turnoff from the ambiguous development that the Iranians have pursued that basically has left open the door to weapons development as well as energy development.
Mm-hmm. And there are reports that Russia has said it will build a nuclear reactor in Iran. This as talks to dismantle Iran's nuclear program are underway. I mean, what do you make of this?
The issue is that coupled with ambiguous weapons development programs and with the regionally destabilizing approach strategically, which is what the Iranians have pursued, you can't trust that nuclear energy won't be turned into nefarious purposes. So I think that's the name of the game. If the Russians want to help after a deal that has ironclad guarantees that there'll be no weapons development, if they want to help with a nuclear energy plant for peaceful purposes, that's a separate issue, entirely separate issue. Now, of course, Russia has its own aggressive war going on in Ukraine. We're sanctioning them for that. So I'm not going to say that the United States would be okay with it. There's still going to be sanctions related to Ukraine war, but it's much less of a concern than the ambiguous program that we have currently that could lead to weaponization very quickly.
And I think you hit the nail on the head there. How do we know that Iran won't use its nuclear capabilities for nefarious purposes? I want to ask about this explosion in Iran's main port. I mean, it looks like simple negligence, but it's no coincidence that this port also stores chemicals used for Iran's ballistic missiles program, according to multiple reports. I mean, what's your take on this explosion, and how is it going to affect the regime?
Well, my immediate thought was to remember the blast in Beirut. You remember a couple years ago, something similar where people said, how could this negligence occur? And then further forensic investigation led to the conclusion that actually this was part of Assad and Lebanese Hezbollah storing the explosive materials that were used in barrel bombs against the Syrian people. So this very negligent and nefarious mingling of civilian economy with military means and supplies that were being used against Assad's own people is what caused the explosion. I think here, could it be negligence? Sure. But is it also culpable on the part of the Iranian regime to have explosive material for missiles networked into the same place where they've got civilians living and working and the biggest civilian port that they've got? So yeah, this is part of the military capacity of Iran, part of their nefarious regional activities. It could just be negligence that led to the explosion, or it could be a message to help spur the negotiations. Without access to the classified materials, I'd have to go 50-50 on which one of those it was.
Absolutely. All right, Colonel Rich Outzen, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Good to see you. Thank you.
The notion that giving land to the Palestinians will result in peace must end. In the aftermath of October 7th, the dangers of creating a Palestinian state in Israel's heartland have become even more evident. Israel 365 Action, which is running in the election for the World Zionist Congress, calls for a one-state solution governed by Israel. They call for a Jewish state that fights discrimination against Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria by strengthening and expanding these communities. Zionist values need to be reinforced. Connections between Jews and Christians need to be solidified. and refusal of a Palestinian state should be a top priority. Be the change you want to see in the region. Vote for Israel 365 Action now by scanning the QR code on your screen.
And early this morning, red alert sirens sounded throughout parts of Israel following a projectile that the IDF confirmed was launched from Yemen. The Arava and Dead Sea areas were the target of a Houthi ballistic missile launched from Yemen at southern Israel at around 5 a.m. The Iranian-backed Houthis have claimed responsibility for the launch, saying they were aiming at the Nevatim airbase in Israel's Negev region. The IDF said the missile was intercepted by the Air Force prior to crossing into Israeli territory, and there were no reports of injuries from the attack. Meanwhile, a Hamas delegation is in Cairo, Egypt for a hostage and ceasefire talks, as the terrorist group announces they are open to an agreement that would release all remaining hostages for a 5-year ceasefire. ILTV's Shosh Bedrosian has more details on the talks and the hostages still in captivity.
Despite Israel's intense, renewed ground offensive in the Gaza Strip, the military pressure has not yielded the result of a ceasefire hostage deal breakthrough yet. Instead, a Hamas delegation in Cairo said they are open to new ideas for an agreement, but that disarming is not on the table for them. According to a new report, the terrorist organization said they are willing to do a one-time release of all remaining hostages in exchange for a 5-year ceasefire. Meanwhile, one Hamas official said they are not open to negotiations when it comes to their weapons, but Israeli media reports other officials indicated Hamas would be willing to hand over its weapons to the next group that rules the Gaza Strip. Reports say some Israeli officials are downplaying the chance of a breakthrough deal and simply stating the war would end if Hamas released the 59 hostages still in captivity. Analysts say holding on to the hostages is the only power and upper hand the terrorist organization continues to have in this war. Over the weekend, released hostage Ron Krivoy spoke out for the first time since his release. The Russian-Israeli citizen was kidnapped from the Nova Music Festival and was released in November of 2023, as the terrorist organization has close ties to the Kremlin. Krivoy's story is widely unknown, but said he managed to escape his captors after being held in an apartment in Gaza. He was eventually caught by Palestinian civilians who he said attacked him. He was then brought into a deep underground tunnel with sandy floors, held in a cage with 5 other men. The 27-year-old said there were moldy mattresses and no food. Krivoy said IDF soldier Matan Angrest arrived to the tunnel one day after him. Angrest was kidnapped from his tank while defending the border of Gaza on October 7th, and recently his family authorized the release of these horrifying images of his abduction by civilians dragging him from his tank. Krivoy said Angrest was terrified and was suffering from severe injuries. He believed Angrest's hand was paralyzed and said he had severe burns on it. He said Angrest underwent severe interrogation before he even left Israeli territory on October 7th, but was suffering from severe injuries and likely went unconscious, and said terrorists tried to revive him by electrocuting him with a car battery. Lidar, negotiations are still set to take place this week as the ground offensive still continues inside of the Gaza Strip. There are 59 hostages still in Hamas captivity at this time, including one American, Idan Alexander. Lidar?
For the report. And ILTV, Ynet Global, and Israel Plus invite you to our next virtual event, Voices of Valor, happening tomorrow, April 28th at 12 p.m. Eastern. This powerful event honors the heroes of October 7th, the defenders of Israel, and the courageous individuals, Jewish and non-Jewish, who have stood for Zionism and against anti-Semitism over the past 18 months. You'll hear from war heroes like Major General Noam Tibon and Oz Davidian, who rescued more than 120 people from the Nova Festival in his own car. We'll also speak with the parents of Hirsch Goldberg-Polin, the late former hostage, and the parents of American-Israeli hostage Omer Neutra, who was murdered on October 7th and whose body is still being held in Gaza. Joining the conversation, Columbia University's Shai Davidai and Harvard alum Matan Yafe, who sued the school over anti-Semitism. To register or get updates, just scan the QR code on your screen. And the IDF announced the deaths of an IDF soldier and an undercover border police officer in the Gaza Strip battles over the weekend. Their deaths raise the total of soldiers killed on or since October 7th of 2023 to 849. More on this from ILTV's Devil Klein.
The IDF released a statement confirming 2 casualties from intense fighting in the Gaza Strip in isolated incidents over the weekend. In the first incident, IDF soldiers from the 143rd Division were operating in the Tel Sultan neighborhood near the Philadelphia corridor when a terrorist squad opened fire on the soldiers. 4 soldiers were wounded in the gun battle and evacuated for treatment. In a separate incident in the Sajaiya stronghold, the 16th Infantry Brigade and undercover police unit were clearing the area and destroying terrorist infrastructure when a gun battle with Hamas terrorists ensued, killing First Sergeant Neta Yitzhak Kahana. And in another incident, an anti-tank guided missile was launched by Hamas terrorists toward a 46th Battalion tank. Captain Ido Voloch, 21, from Jerusalem, an Armored Corps officer and platoon commander, was killed and 2 other soldiers were injured. With the fall of Sergeant Kahana and Captain Voloch, the IDF released the total number of IDF soldiers killed on or since October 7th, 2023, 849 fallen heroes. This number was released as the nation prepares for Yom HaZikaron, or Israeli Memorial Day, set to begin this Tuesday evening. On Yom HaZikaron, Israel mourns the lives lost to terror and the fallen IDF heroes who have given their lives in the battlefield for the safety and security of all Israelis. May their memories forever be a blessing.
May their memories be for a blessing. And moving on, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas has named a close confidant as his deputy, positioning him to take over as his successor. Abbas, who is 89 years old, has named Hussein al-Sheikh, a Fatah veteran, to the role, in a move that is widely being viewed as a step to appease international doubts over the PA. Joining us now with more on this appointment, its significance, and who al-Sheikh is Itamar Marcus, founder and director of Palestinian Media Watch. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So first of all, what can you tell us about Hussein al-Sheikh? Who is he?
The important position that he's had in the last number of years, he was sort of an intermediary to the Israeli population for the Palestinian Authority. So he had to learn how to present a moderate side, how to meet with Israelis, and to present the Palestinian Authority as if it was a moderate organization. For this reason, he, for about now, who the world sees as a terrorist supporter to a large extent, he would be a great solution for him because over the years he has not made as many terror-supporting statements or has actively supported terror as other Palestinian leaders. Like a person like Jabril Rajoub, who supports terror regularly, who would like to be the next leader. Hussein al-Sheikh has been quieter, but we still know he's a terrorist supporter.
Mm-hmm. You know, the Palestinian Authority was meant to be a partner for peace, but clearly it has been anything but. You know, for our viewers who may not know, the PA continues its pay-for-slay policy, in which it pays lifetime salaries to terrorists and their families for murdering Israelis. Again, not much of a partner for peace. Do you think al-Sheikh could reform the PA? Will he turn it into a partner for peace?
Sheikh couldn't do it, even if he wanted to. First of all, in all the popularity polls that have ever been taken in recent years about who would you like to see the leader, he draws 3%. He's not even on the radar really as a potential Palestinian leader. So he couldn't change the Palestinian Authority even if he wanted to. However, from statements that he's made, I don't think he would want to. For example, he talked about Walid Daka, a Palestinian terrorist murderer who was in jail, who died in jail last year. He called him a freedom fighter, and he hopes that future generations will learn from him and go in his path. This is about a murderer. He's recently been talking about how happy he is that Hamas and Fatah are having quiet negotiations, and he just wants Hamas to join and work with him. Well, if you want to reform the PA, why would you be having quiet meetings with Hamas, this horrific murderous terror organization, and say that you hope they join the Palestinian Authority or the PLO? Mm-hmm. So I think Hussein al-Sheikh has been quiet because that was his job from Mahmoud Abbas, to be quiet in terms of terror support. But one, I don't think he has the desire to change the Palestinian Authority, and two, even if he did have the desire, he doesn't have the power to do it.
Mm-hmm. And Prime Minister Netanyahu has made it very clear that the PA will not rule in Gaza. Could this appointment change that? I mean, this is seen mostly as a move to sort of assuage or convince European and other world leaders. Is it working?
One of the things that we at Palestinian Media Watch try to show is that the hatred and demonization of Jews, the anti-Semitism, the denial of Israel's right to exist is not a single person issue. It's not coming from Mahmoud Abbas alone. It's coming from every aspect. It's coming from the Ministry of Education, where you have a different leader who's in charge of Ministry of Education. You're having it through all parts of Palestinian society. You have it in the Ministry of Culture, who names events after terrorists. You have the schools that are named after terrorists. The terror support of the Palestinian Authority, denial of Israel's right to exist, is so fundamental. It can't change with one person. Like I said, even if he wanted to, but we certainly have no indication that he even wants to.
Mm-hmm. So just an extension of Mahmoud Abbas. Itamar Marcus, thank you so much for your insights today.
Thank you very much.
And for the second time in 50 years, Syrian Druze clerics crossed the border into Israel. This time for the holiday of Ziyara, the religious leaders were authorized to stay over for one night, too. ILTV's Shosh Bedrosian has been following the developments and has the details.
Hundreds of Druze who live in the Golan Heights waved flags at the border of Israel and Syria as they waited for the buses to cross beyond this gate. Crowds erupted with cheers when 600 Syrian Druze clerics crossed the border, marking the second time since the fall of the Assad regime religious leaders came to Israel for a visit. It was the second time in 5 decades a visit like this took place, but this time Defense Minister Israel Katz allowed the religious leaders to have an overnight stay in Israel.
I feel from my heart, it's like something very, very, very great has happened today. Especially we are in the day of Ziyarat Sayyidina Nabi Shu'aib alayhi salam. So thank you for everyone. Thank you for who wants to help us to meet our family. Finally.
The religious leaders visited important Druze shrines and sites for the holiday of Ziyara. Since the fall of the Assad regime, Israeli Druze believe there's an opportunity to build a bridge to their family members on the other side of the Hermon Mountains in Syria. Many of them have had little to no contact with each other because of tensions in the region in the past, especially under the Assad regime. But with its collapse, opportunities continue to grow for the Syrian Druze community with visits like this one. Some family members reunited for the first time in 50 years, and Defense Minister Israel Katz even floated the idea around of offering Syrian Druze an opportunity to work in Israel. Many see the visit as historic, with emotional moments and gatherings for friends and families who live just a few kilometers away but are separated by a border for many years.
Certainly an historic event. And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Cloudy skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of around 14 degrees Celsius or 57 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see clear skies alongside warm temperatures with highs of 25 degrees Celsius or 77 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channel, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Ladar Gravelazi. Be well, stay safe, and thank you so much for watching.